2024 Australian Grand Prix sees the return of Carlos Sainz from 2 weeks out after the totally not tactical appendix surgery. Sainz is coming back 3 kilograms lighter and 30 kilometers an hour faster. Coincidence? Probably. At the start of the race, Carlos Sainz had what looked like a great overtake on Max Verstappen on lap 2, only for Max's car to spontaneously combust and his car to have violent diarrhea in the pit lane. At the start of the weekend, Alex Albon smashed his car up. Williams, for some reason, didn't have a spare chassis, and his teammate Logan Sargent is so that Williams decided to give Albon Sargent's car. This is pretty pathetic when you think about Logan Sargent's potential future with the Williams. It's now looking like there isn't one. And I mean, it isn't anything new for a driver to not be entered into a race. For example, a couple of years ago, Mick Schumacher crashed into the wall and he wasn't entered into the race. However, he was the one who crashed. This crash wasn't Logan Sargent's fault. He had nothing to do with it, but clearly the Williams team have such little belief in him that they're just willing to give his car away. This ultimately left Logan Sargent doing nothing after P1 and basically spent the entire weekend cosplaying as a Formula One driver. At the end of the race, Albon finished in P11, so ultimately him and Logan Sargent did score the exact same amount of points this weekend. After his worst ever qualifying in Australia, qualifying at P11, Lewis decided to do a cheeky Bono my tyres have gone before the race to conjure up some of the old magic, but ultimately his engine blew up on lap 17. A lot of explosions this weekend. At the start of the race, Fernando Alonso decided to take a gamble and start on the hard tyres, a gamble which ultimately paid off with Lewis's lap 17 retirement. This allowed him to get a cheap pit stop under the virtual safety car, and in the later rounds allowed him to battle with George Russell. George Russell and Fernando Alonso gave us a couple of great laps of excitement. It was real cat and mouse back and forth stuff for the last 3-4 laps of the race. It was pretty fantastic to watch. I mean, in those last 4-5 laps of George and Fernando, we had probably more excitement than we did for the last 20 laps beforehand of the race. It was amazing. With every single lap which went by, George Russell was just inching slightly closer and closer, and Crofty was losing his shit. But ultimately, on the last lap, George Russell remembered he was George Russell and decided to shunt it into the wall.
He just fully turned into me.
Actually, he did. It turns out, afterwards, the telemetry showed that Fernando Alonso kind of pulled a bit of a cheeky move and almost brake tested George Russell, sending him off of the track. But Fernando, in Fernando form, is never gonna accept what the steward said, so he went onto Twitter for this lengthy paragraph. Yeah, I tried a good 2 or 3 times to read this out in full for everyone, but it just seems like a bit of an angry rant and it was confusing to read, so feel free to pause it right about now and read it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. And in true Twitter form, harking back to the good old days, pre-X, it has been decided that Fernando Alonso is a victim of racism from the FIA. That's right, the Fédération
Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile
will only punish you if you're not British.
La sanción que le acaban de poner a Fernando Alonso tras el Gran Premio de...
I don't know what this man's saying, but it's probably something along the lines of, Fernando Alonso is the best driver ever. George Russell was dirty, cheating scumbag Brit. Tapas forever, fish and chips never, and the FIA are racist. The budget cuts have been hitting Sauber pretty hard as they've had to stop using the air guns to take their wheels off and had to start using a wrench. I mean, I think that's the only way you can explain the fact that their pit stops have been on average 30 seconds for both drivers. I mean, Valtteri Bottas is very well known for having very lengthy pit stops. I mean, he's got the longest ever pit stop at, 2-3 days it took? Insane. But Sauber have gone, hey, we can do better. We are going to make every pit stop the longest pit stop. Welcome on board, you Finnish bastard. And despite the fact that Sauber's pit stops have been 30 seconds apiece, adding many minutes to their race time, Alpine still managed to finish bottom. I really don't get what is going on in France, but these guys are consistently managing to be
Merde.
It's kind of amazing when you think about it. McLaren also had an amazing race, finishing 3rd and 4th. I think it was brilliant. And perhaps one day Lando Norris might allow Oscar Piastri to stand on the podium in his own race.